Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the October 21st edition of the Lexington City Council meeting. I want to give a special welcome to, I believe it's Dr. Collington's class. Welcome, and as you have questions or issues, or if you get unruly, we do have the police here. But as you have questions, council's here to support you with that, and be glad to meet with you afterwards as well. If you all would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you all very much. Next item on the agenda is consideration of the agenda. Unless council objects, I have a request from Main Street Lexington to move under the presentations, to move up in the meeting and have consideration of their request. And I also have a request from Leslie to share some insights on the street renaming policy from her efforts on Confederate Circle. And with those two adjustments, unless there's an objection, we can approve the agenda with those modifications. Excellent. Hearing none, I would move straight into presentations and call on Rebecca Logan and her team. Rebecca, if you can press the button there, get it lit up. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, council members, city manager, Mr. Mayor. So, Main Street Lexington has been working on this project for just about over a year. It's the Triangle Gateway. We're calling it the Gateway Triangle Garden. It is the entrance into town from the north side past VMI. And we have spent quite a few permutations of what this would look like. It is a very inconsistent garden in that, depending on the weather and the workload of the arborist, it could be beautiful, and there are sometimes it's not so beautiful, and it's a lot of work. It's also costly because it gets changed 4 times out of the year. So Main Street Lexington has worked in our design committee to put together this proposal that you see before you. This is the third of 3 permutations and the final. One was started off being a fountain, and that was rejected because of the 2 universities and the potential of a lot of soap suds being put into the water. We also talked about a sculptural piece of art, very difficult because of the sight lines. So we have before you, very excited about this and final proposal, which has been approved by the Architectural Review Board. It is about a third of the work for our arborist. There's some hardscaping, as you see in your drawings. There is the rest of the land is under sedum, which is a ground cover, and it takes care of itself. You don't really have to do much with it. And then the 3 planters will be changed out seasonally 4 times a year. As you come from the north into Lexington, it will announce to you that you have arrived at the city. Where it says Lexington, it is letters that are embossed into some stone. And it will also say established 1778, and the little bit of uplighting from the bottom so that it's visible at night. We have proposed, well, let me just say to you, this site is significant because it is why the city of Lexington started where it is. It was the source of fresh water from 2 springs that came together at the site that created the town branch. And therefore, the city of Lexington was developed at this spot. They could have gone in 2 directions for flatter land, but they chose a much hillier spot because of the fresh water. So it is a very significant and historically important spot. It also announces the gateway entrance into our city, having gone through VMI, and then, you have the VMI post entrance, the Washington and Lee entrance. So, that said, we already have the commitment from Washington and Lee and from VMI for $10,000 each as seed money for this project, and we're here in front of you today for asking for the same amount of money. The project will cost about $50,000, and we're expecting that the rest of this project will be funded by private citizens, civic groups. We've already spoken to one of our area banks, etc. So this would be enough of the seed money for us as private public partners to get the project rolling. Questions?
Thank you, Rebecca. Members of council have any questions? Ms. Strong?
What's the time frame for the project?
Well, if we get this last commitment, then we will start ordering materials, and we're hoping to get started just as soon as the weather is, we're able to start it in the spring, is when the weather cooperates. And that gives us time between now and then to raise the additional funds.
Mr. Ayers?
Yeah, Rebecca, I'm very excited about this project, but I'm curious, was there any thought given to perhaps having a plaque or a marker which explains the historical significance of that spot? Because what you just told me, I mean, I've lived here a long time, and I was not aware of that. And I think that's a fascinating detail. It would be really nice to
That is an excellent question. And if you look carefully at the front, oh, well, you're not going to be able to see it. This is so tiny. We do have the purpose within the plan, as you come across the crosswalk, you can walk to the point of the triangle, and we hope to have a monument that would be set into the ground that explains this very same thing. Yeah, because I didn't know it either. It's nice to know.
Conceptually, it'd be very much like the town layout at the corner of Nelson and Main.
Exactly,
That's in,
exactly,
terrific.
yeah.
Mr. Ziegler?
So just to clarify, so you do envision this to be a place where pedestrians will navigate traffic from multiple directions and then congregate, kind of like the rendering, you've got pedestrians there hanging out?
You're about the 10th person that's asked that question, and that's a really excellent question. And the answer is absolutely not. What we're encouraging is people to use the crosswalk. It's there because it's the safest place for you to cross from one side of the street, maybe to Rockbridge Music. You can walk along the point, which is paved already, to the entrance of this circular design that we've created to view it. We do not encourage people to spend any time there or to walk around. It's confusing because there's a person in one of your drawings, and that's for scale only. What I didn't explain, but it's in this document, is that we have worked with Public Works, and Arthur Bartenstein has also spoken with VDOT to be very mindful of sight lines so that there's nothing too high to confuse the sight of a driver coming in either direction.
David, I would suggest, as we're talking about this, it certainly is out of the scope of Main Street Lexington, but as traveled and visited other college towns and other pedestrian-friendly towns, we have the opportunity that we can put some illumination so that you hit a button and it lights up that a pedestrian is crossing to alert automobiles. Maybe something that with the North Main Street VDOT project in the next year or so could be incorporated, but need to talk to VDOT and work with the city engineers.
Because it is a blind intersection for folks crossing from the W&L side behind that hedge trying to get across. Mm-hmm. It's blind. People step out before you see them presently, and so sounds good. I mean, we're certainly not going to solve that problem now, but
Right.
thank you.
But we're mindful of that, and I actually love that idea. And then Jim Plaz, our city manager, also had a great suggestion. There's a couple of, I don't know if you have that in any of your art that's in front of you, but there's a couple of signage posts that are there exists now that we would like to see just go away if we can work with VDOT and put those, US North, US 11 North, US 11 South, put them in the asphalt and just take away all the signage so it's all clear and just, attractive.
The information talks about seasonal flowers being changed out. Does that include decorations for various holidays within a season?
I think that we haven't really thought it through that far, but absolutely. For instance, someone did ask us, we had a design committee meeting this morning, and someone asked us, well, what is it going to look like in the winter? Because, plants aren't going to survive. And our suggestion was to do what we do with the tree planters along Main Street, and that's take out any of the plants that are planted as seasonal plants and just decorate them with greenery and red bows. And so, yeah, the answer would be yes. We just haven't thought it through that far yet.
They have
Mr. Alligood.
great idea. How tall are these planters?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that. They are, they're not all consistent because it's not actually a completely level ground. Arthur Bartenstein is on our design committee, and he created all of these drawings for you. And he's a landscape architect.
Yeah, sure.
So I think they're approximately 14 to 20 inches, depending on the slope of the land.
Okay.
They're not high at all. It's, because we had to be mindful of sight lines of drivers.
Yeah, it's attractive, and in terms of seating that was mentioned, possibly for people to gather, you'd indicated that this is not a gathering place.
No.
In there, and I could see why, with the traffic and whatnot, with the noise and whatnot, nobody's going to carry on a conversation there and whatnot. But it's a very attractive design, so give full credit to Arthur Bartenstein for coming up with this design.
Thank
And
you.
having the flowers is always attractive.
Yeah, and those would be changed 4 times a year, depending on the season, and then possibly holiday decorations.
Mr. Ziegler.
May I make a motion that we approve the request to allocate the $10,000 towards this project?
Absolutely.
Second.
Have a second by Ms. Alexander. Any further discussion? If not, I would ask for a roll call vote. Ms. Strawn?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
Mr. Smith? Aye. Mr. Ziegler?
Aye.
Ms. Alexander?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us and the good work that Main Street does in our community. And please pass our appreciation on to Arthur and his team for the work that they brought forward.
I will do that. Thank you. Thank you all.
Next item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes. You have our October 7 work session and regular meeting. Those were in your packet beforehand. Any modifications or observations? Hearing none, we will approve those as presented, and we'll move straight into citizens' remarks and comments. We invite members of the public to come and share what's on your mind. And at this time, I'd like to open up for citizens' remarks and comments. Do we have anyone sign in? Not sure. Is there anyone who would like to speak this evening? Seeing no activity towards that. I know there was a move afoot for probably a gross generalization of the meeting so the students could be excused sooner, but that won't be forthcoming. We will close the citizens' remarks and comments and move into unfinished business, and I'd call on Ms. Strawn with a brief report that she has.
Earlier this month, Charles and a couple who live on the street and I talked to the neighbors of Confederate Circle about changing the name of the street. And we were not there to get signatures for a petition. We were just introducing the idea and kind of taking the temperature of the neighborhood. in getting feedback on our name change policy. And we thought it was very good and useful experience. We spoke to most of the residents, and at this time, fewer than 75% of the residents are in favor of a name change, and we introduced them to a designated neighbor who will take the lead on any further discussions. And a few observations and comments about our process. The 75% agreement requirement seems to be a fair number. No one took issue with that figure. Even those in favor of a name change did not think that it should be lower. And the $400 fee is seen as a huge obstacle and deterrent. We told them the fee would be waived in this case and explained that the fee was in place for any type of name change. However, the average citizen probably won't know that. And actually, somebody on the street did initially start a petition and then heard it was $400 and stopped. The prohibition of naming streets for someone unless they've been deceased for at least 10 years, we should maybe revisit that. Perhaps 3 to 5 years is more appropriate. And some of those opposing the name change cited the burden and difficulty of the notifications. It's hard to argue with that. Absolutely no one was in favor of council making the name change, even if it meant protecting them from backlash from an angry neighbor. And it was pointed out that our procedure does not address split households. We told them they have to work that out, but each household only gets one vote. And there have been at least 2 black families that have lived on the street. So all in all, it was very educational and it was a worthwhile experience. And I don't know if, Charles, if you want to add anything to that.
I agree with everything you said. The observation that I have is that our policy, the city council policy for changing the name of the street pretty much guarantees that there won't be any street name changes. That's my observation in there. And so on our street, on Confederate Circle, there are 12 families. And the best we could do on a good day was 4 of those would not agree. So that left 8. And then we didn't make contact with some of those 8, like another 4, I think, of the 8 that weren't there and whatnot. But in terms of guaranteeing the status quo, I think our policy is going to do that. And we're not going to see a name change. That's my observation.
Any questions from council?
2, Leslie or Charles, can you remind me, when was that street named Confederate Circle? Do you guys know?
Yeah, I looked it up before we went. It was built, that street happened in the 60s.
Got it. I'm just wondering, when folks on a street are approached about a name change, whether it might be helpful if they were approached with an alternate name. I mean, some people are afraid of the unknown, and I just wonder if maybe people would be more receptive if they had an alternative, so they could envision an alternative rather than just an open-ended, we want to change the name.
Right. And we had that conversation. Like I said, we were not trying to get a petition signed, so we basically introduced the idea and just talked to people about it. And
asked for their ideas.
Yeah, right, and asked for ideas and got ideas on names, which is why I suggest maybe at some point we revisit our limitation on naming it after somebody who's deceased. But no, I don't think that was a deterrent at all. It was just the overall process. Either they, didn't want the name changed, or they did want it, and, but I don't think what the potential name was really played into that at all.
I think we ran into one individual that was fiercely against changing the name, whatnot. And it seemed the sense for those who were opposed to changing the name, the sense that I had was they didn't want the hassle of doing it. They didn't want to go through whatever it was in their minds, the hassle. Principle is one thing, but hassle is another. And they didn't want the hassle.
Okay, please. Jim?
Last is in the way here. I didn't know if Mr. Ayers wanted to comment on an email that he and I received today from Mr. Knox on Evergreen Place about his recommendations and comments on street renaming.
Well, I did want to wait to discuss this with Mr. Knox because I wasn't certain exactly what his point was about UPS or USPS. But I will say that Mr. Knox on Evergreen Place says that he is pleased to have made this change, but he does view it as cumbersome and he wouldn't want it forced on residents who don't wish to have a street name changed. And he does feel that city council shouldn't be changing street names. So that's his position. He has had some bumps along the way in terms of the name change. It took 2 months to get it on Google Maps and Apple Maps, but that's done. So there have been little things like that he is fine with and expected. But again, his concern was foisting this on residents who may not want that hassle.
Well, thank you for sharing Mr. Knox's experience, and thank you for the efforts of Council Members Strawn and Alligood for speaking and listening to our neighbors and their desires. One of the pieces of our policy, and for students here, we adopted a policy, I can't remember exactly when, within the past year, a street renaming. And glad to get you a copy of that policy if you should want to see it. But one of the obligations of anyone soliciting and petitioning have to achieve 75% of the residents of the street, and you all to agree to change it, and also agree to the change of the name, unified in what the new name will be. So that sometimes it can just be challenging to speak to your neighbors, much less agreeing on something. But I'm grateful for the information that you all have brought forward and engaging in the conversation. And I hope that more neighbors will have more conversations respectfully, which it sounded, for the most part, you all were welcomed and well received. So thank you for doing so. Next item of business is reports and commissions. The Blue Ridge Resource Authority, Mr. Smith.
We're still going through the hiring process. Hopefully we'll have that nailed up within a week or two. But nothing else new to report.
Thank you, sir. Main Street Lexington.
The downtown property survey is in progress by the Economic Vitality Committee, and the Design Committee is working on fundraising for the Gateway Triangle Garden that you just heard about. Potential next projects for the committee are improvements to Courthouse Square and Baxter Alley, which is the parking lot area kind of behind Sugar Maple Trading Company. And events are back. Downtown trick-or-treating is on Friday, October 29th from 3:30 to 5 p.m. because many of the non-retail businesses are closed on Sunday. And more details soon on the Candlelight Processional, the Small Business Saturday, Love Lex Lotto, the Christmas Parade, and the Jingle Bell Run. They are all back for this year. And the Main Street Board gave a shout out to Celia Rainey for the beautiful landscaping at the North Main Street entrance, which is soon to be our Gateway Triangle Garden. And welcome to downtown to Tommy's Arcade on West Nelson Street. So if you're a pinball wizard, you might want to go visit there. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Strawn. Yes, Tommy is with the Chamber of Commerce having a ribbon cutting at 3 o'clock tomorrow. So come out and see Tommy's new place. Planning Commission, Ms. Strawn.
Sure. We met on Thursday, October 14th, and we continued crafting an ordinance for small cell facilities and began discussing our approach for planned unit developments. And John Driscoll and Pat Bradley are reconvening the Green Infrastructure Working Group to assist with the bike and pedestrian plan data gathering. And the bike and pedestrian plan survey tool is available on the city website through the end of the month. So go to lexingtonva.gov, click on Government, City Projects, and Lexington Bike Pedestrian Plan, and please share your ideas for bike and pedestrian improvements. And the W&L engineering students are designing a dock and boat launch for Jordan's Point for their capstone course. And not to be outdone, the VMI engineering students are designing a half pipe for the skate park. And that's all I have unless there's any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Strawn? Lots of fun, exciting cooperation, town and gown. Thank you. Regional Tourism Board, Mr. Ayers.
Thank you. The board met on Wednesday, the 20th, and the main item of business was voting on our replacement for former board member Jerry Price. Our newest member, I'm happy to report, is Brooke Sheehan. Brooke was born and raised here in Lexington. She is the Fast Forward career coach at Dabney Lancaster, soon to be Mountain Gateway Community College. And she also runs her own wedding planning company, Brooke Sheehan Events, and she is very busy. Brooke brings a lot of valuable experience, local knowledge, and also youthful energy to the tourism board, and we're very excited to have her. Also on Wednesday, and Jim might speak more about this, but the Rockbridge County Administrator Spencer Suter, the BV City Manager Jason Tyree, and our own Jim Halaz attended a Zoom meeting on how to participate in Virginia Tourism's ARPA Tourism Recovery Program. There's, I believe, $30 million up for grabs. It's going to be allocated across 133 localities. And in order to participate in that, we had to have our regional leaders attend this call. So I really appreciate Jim sitting in on that. We're not sure exactly how much our region would receive for that, but it might be enough to get started on a great regional project. And finally, the application deadline for round 2 of Regional Tourism Sponsorship Program was Wednesday, and this is to award sponsorship money for regional events that partner with tourism between January 1st and June 30th. We received 5 sponsorship applications. That's fewer than we did in the first round. I believe we received 14 or 15, but it's mainly because there are fewer events between January 1 and June 30th, and so we wanted to encourage events in that period, so we were happy to have the applications that we did. We have just over $10,000 in funds to distribute this round, and board members will be reviewing and scoring the applications, and sponsorships will be announced in late November. And that's everything I have, unless somebody has a question.
Just a comment. Everything sounds really good, but notice that you left out the Dope Sick movie there, which now airing.
Thank you for mentioning that. I actually mentioned it when they were filming in Covington, but they were staying here at the Georges. And I should have mentioned that. It's airing on Hulu, stars Michael Keaton and Rosario Dawson, and it's about the OxyContin pandemic.
Opioid epidemic.
Opioid epidemic. So it's now playing on Hulu.
Thank you. Lots of fun stuff going there. Mr. Smith.
A question about the ARPA tourism money available. What's the process for that? How do we get in on that, and what's the scheduling?
Well, the reason why Jim and Spencer and Jason sat in on that call was to find out that question. In order for localities to participate, they had to sit in on that to see the process and also hear the requirements on how to spend that money. Like, this money can't replace what we already spend on tourism. It has to be for something which promotes the recovery of tourism. So, for instance, one project that sprang to mind that might be a good one is it might get us started on the wayfinding project, the signage project across the region. So that would be a very good fit for something like this. So I believe we should find out in late November how much money is available to us. Is that right, Jim?
I believe the portal goes live October 29th. Jennifer Bell, our finance director, also was on that call, and that's when we will find out what type of funding we have available to us. And every locality in the state is guaranteed some funding based on their per capita formula. The portal will contain the requirements and uses of the funds that we can use that money for. And then we'll have to study that carefully to make sure whether it's Lexington alone or regionally that we put together a project that will meet the requirements of how that funding is spent.
Any other questions? Mr. Ayers, thank you for the report and your service on tourism. RARO, Mr. Ziegler.
I don't have a report, but Chad Coffey's here, our executive director, and in case he wants to say anything, I will defer to him. See how I did that?
Nothing quite like when a board member tells you to speak. Chad, welcome. Glad you're here.
Just a brief update. We're finishing our fall sports. Our junior and senior football finished up on Tuesday night. Lexington and Buena Vista, which we are in conjunction with the Allegheny Youth Football League in that particular sport. Lexington and Buena Vista teams were at the upper tier in that sports programming this year. Soccer will be winding down some tonight, and Saturday will be the last day for soccer. Cheerleading is finishing up. And starting tomorrow, our winter registration. Our winter registration has been going on for the last 3 weeks. It will close tomorrow. Early indications of the paperwork and coming in is that numbers are pretty good, consistent. Seems like they're climbing back up close to pre-COVID numbers. I'm not sure the last meeting if you talked about RARO Day, but we were able to hold RARO Day on October the 2nd. It was, by all accounts, a success. I would like to publicly thank Lexington Police Department, Lexington Fire and Rescue for helping out that day, being a part of it. VMI was able to send their basketball and baseball teams over. It was, I tried to keep count, but when the number of kids, when there was a mass influx, it was kind of hard to keep count. But the last I had on my clicker was 170 some, and I know there were some more after that. So we were figuring probably between 175 and 200 kids showed up that day. Any questions about what's going on in RARO?
Members of council have any questions? Hearing none, Chad, thanks again for being here. Thanks for having, I think it was perhaps a RARO evening with the football, high school football game. It was a great picture seeing our star quarterback high-fiving the players. And I know, having been a child growing up in Lexington, those are magical moments to get on the football field.
Yes, I failed to mention that Rockbridge County High School and Perry McClure earlier, but Rockbridge County High School this past Friday night recognized all of our football and cheerleaders.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It
Good
was a
stuff.
Good evening, very
Yep.
good evening. Thank you.
Thank you for the work you're doing for our children. Next item is threshold. Ms. Alexander.
No report.
Thank you, ma'am. Morris Service Authority, Mr. Alligood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The MSA, Morris Service Authority, had a special meeting this past Tuesday to discuss, continuing discussion on the needed modernization for the water treatment plant. And previous meeting, this is the second meeting, that during the first meeting, the estimate figure of approximately $20 million was broached as to what it would take. One of the new pieces of information Tuesday was that 20 million may be the minimum. There was no maximum given. And they're throwing in the consultants are adding to the dilemma by talking about the supply chain issues that are happening now in the country that would directly affect materials that would be needed. Another factor that was talked about was how to proceed. Right now, the direction has not been fixed on what items need to occur. No priority's been set, which things occur first, then second, and how the money is going to be spent. And so that has to happen next. And then there has to be an engineering study, review, and work to prepare the engineering documentation, but there has to be direction for the engineers to take in there to do that. And so that hasn't happened yet. I was anticipating that would have happened perhaps on this second meeting, but it didn't, so it has to happen next. I don't know what the schedule is going to be for when that will be determined, so that's hanging out there. There was no mention made of the water wastewater treatment thing, that's all to come, and that's all going to be new, and we haven't heard anything about that part. And so that's where we are. We're kind of in between, and there has to be direction settled on soon for this project to go ahead. And we have to, as MSA, get in line for funding. You have to get your engineering straight, you have to decide what you're going to do, and then decide what the money is going to be, and then go after the money. You know, and right now is a good time to borrow the money, but MSA is not ready yet for that. Anyway, that's the report.
Thanks, Mr. Alligood. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Alligood? Hearing none. Next item is Mayor's report, and briefly, just some things to share and celebrate. Wanted to acknowledge Bobby Bergstresser and his lifetime commitment to trucking and business in our community. As last week, the week of October 5th, celebrated White's 40th anniversary of operation. And no, it was well attended. I was not able to attend, but wanted to acknowledge the contributions he's made to our community. Wanted to share a thank you to Glenn Petty and the Virginia Horse Center, who hosted Ben Klein, and a great function out there. And also wanted to offer congratulations to the Rockbridge Farmers Co-op that celebrated their 100th anniversary today by providing hot dogs and potato chips and cake. It was a beautiful afternoon for it, so if you missed it, sorry, it was great. Lastly, had the opportunity to spend some time with President Dudley and General Winds, and one of the items that we talked about was concern of housing, a need for housing for professors in the community. There's just a shortage at this point. And I assured both of them that council was very well aware of the demand being far greater than the supply currently, and we were working diligently with developers for Spotswood in particular to resolve that problem. But it was something we were aware of. And unless you have any questions, I'll pass along to Jim and the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Columbia Gas is still working slowly but diligently in the city, and we do still anticipate they'll finish their work in November. We've touched on the ARPA grant, I think, extensively enough. I'll skip over that. Ms. Strawn mentioned the bike ped plan. I would like to add a little to that in that the consultants are planning a series of meetings with stakeholders here in the community to get more input on the bike ped plan. They've selected some nonprofits and businesses, governmental entities, other entities in our community, outdoor recreation type entities, to give them input on the plan itself. So if you are invited, please take part in it, I should say, because it's important to our community to get that kind of information to put together a really good plan for the community. Lexington Fire Department has worked over the last week or two to put on some educational events for a fire safety week, and they did one at Lowe's as well as other places in the community. The department recently assisted Rockbridge County Fire and Rescue in a search for a missing 14-year-old camper, and that young person was located after about 2.5 hour search, and apparently no worse off for the time spent alone out in the woods. All 3 shifts of the department recently spent some time familiarizing themselves with the buildings and facilities on the Kendall property, and this process is crucial for determining response, actions, and approaches on a large site such as Kendall, so that when there's an emergency, they know where to go and how to get to those buildings or facilities that they need to respond to. Chief Dickerson continues to work on the new computer-aided dispatch and record-keeping system at the Emergency Communications Center, and works with the Fire and Rescue Committee at the ECC for this purpose as well. In the DPW, Public Works, several large areas of broken asphalt on Lee Avenue will be repaired tomorrow by our Public Works staff. These large areas void of asphalt are a result of 2 water line breaks and the subsequent efforts to repair those breaks and fix that water line earlier in the year. There were several excavations that Public Works had to do in that street in order to cut over the services from the old water line to the new line, and these left some pretty large voids in the asphalt. So tomorrow, Public Works crews will be there on site, and they will put in temporary patches that will be there for approximately 2 years. We may also be able to get our street repaving folks in November and make some more permanent repatches, but nonetheless, we will not repave the entire street. We looked at the cost of that, and it's about a $25,000 job. And again, in about 2 years, we'd have to open the street back up, put holes back in it in order to do the Jackson Street project number 1, which is a major water and sewer line repair project for that area of the community. So what we have is temporary, but it's much better, and it's basically what we do in other places in the community while we're awaiting the major street paving that will subsequently occur. The annual bridge inspections are scheduled for the community, and we are we are inspecting Lime Kiln Road, Jordan Street, Route 60 West, and North Main Street, bridges all across Woods Creek, the Moses Mill Bridge over the Mill Race, and the East US 60 Bridge over the parking garage in Varner Lane. And these inspections are used to ascertain the state of good repair scoring for a bridge in our community and across the state, so that we know when it has to be repaired and that it also qualifies for state funding at that time. Police department activities. The department is writing and submitting a number of grants to the Department of Criminal Justice Services. These are 100% grants, and they are being submitted for security cameras, crime prevention and de-escalation training, firearms storage, and safety equipment. The department assisted with traffic control during the annual Lehigh Truck Parade this past weekend, another truck event, and I'll have to say I happened to be at Taylor and Wallace Street quite by accident and saw the tractors going by one after another, dozens in a row. And I've got to admit, it was very impressive seeing these individuals with their families, their children, their friends up in the tractor, driving down the street, and proud of their livelihood and what they do for this community and our country. It was impressive. Chief Green and her staff continue to work on possible alternatives to improve the skateboard park without significant use of city funds. Lastly, the Piovano building closing has been completed and the check is in the bank. The city still does need to replace the commercial stove hood exhaust system in the building, and we're unfortunately waiting for supplies because of that supply chain problem that we're having nationwide. So as soon as we get that new hood, we'll put it in and we'll have completed our obligations to RARA, and we wish them luck in the continued activity they do in this community, helping others who need their assistance. My report, Mr. Mayor. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to handle those.
Mr. Alligood.
I have 2 questions. First one is the bridge inspection. Who does that?
We hire consulting engineers to do that report, that inspection.
So they would just make their stop here in Lexington on the way to do wherever they're doing it, and so is that scheduled ahead of time, like we know what day they're coming?
Yes, absolutely. And you're correct. They have the expertise to go throughout the state and do those inspections that are required by cities and towns all over the Commonwealth.
All right, and question number 2, you had mentioned about grants and security cams, so you can imagine that my question is going to be, what about the body cams? Is this going to pay for the body cams for the police?
No, it does not. I'd have to ask the chief why specifically these projects were selected. I believe there are different grants for the body cams, and these grants were for more specific areas or different areas than the body cam itself. If Chief Green would like to speak, I defer to her.
Chief, come on up.
Good evening, sir, ma'am. We do have a body-worn camera grant that we did complete a couple of months ago. We are waiting for the response to that. We're told probably the end of November we'll hear if we are awarded that grant, but we did complete a grant for body-worn cameras.
What was the amount that we're requesting?
Off the top of my head, it's a 50-50 grant, and it cost about $180-something thousand to have body-worn cameras for all Lexington police officers and for a 5-year maintenance agreement. And we also did the grant in joint with VMI as well. So VMI is also requesting funding for body-worn cameras for all their police officers as well.
And is there any connection with the Rockbridge County Sheriff's Department?
No, I reached out to Rockbridge County Sheriff Department. They did not want to partner with us on the grant. I also spoke to the Commonwealth Attorney, and they are in agreement with us, and part of the grant that we provided is funded for the Commonwealth Attorney Office as well.
So, thank you. So the 180,000 that you're talking about, if it's 50/50, that means ultimately Lexington is going to be in for 80 or 90?
Responsible for about $90,000, but that would be over the course of 5 years. It doesn't have to be all up front. It can be
And
broken down.
VMI is going to do some of that?
VMI is about 25, I don't know their exact cost, but that's our cost, 180,000. Their cost is significantly less because they have a smaller force.
I see. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions for the city manager? Very good. Hearing none. City attorney.
I have no report tonight, but happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Hearing none, we'll move into new business. And the first item is consideration of a resolution of support to designate the Lower Maury River as a Virginia Scenic River. City manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've already been doing some work on this topic. You recall that last spring, early summer, the council did send a letter of support to Department of Natural Resources to explore the designation of a portion of the Maury River as a scenic river. The upstream portion of the Maury River already is a scenic river, as well as the portion of the James River in Rockbridge County. So this is the middle portion that is missing, if you will. The department did indicate that it met all of the requirements for being a scenic river. So what we have tonight is a resolution before City Council to support making that a scenic river, and to ask our delegate and our representative, our delegate and our senator to put through legislation in both houses to have this designation occur. So that's what you see before you, the resolution. Of course, I do recommend it be approved. Our fellow communities of Glasgow, the town of Glasgow, City of Buena Vista, and Rockbridge County are also considering, or have considered, this resolution, and will, I'm sure, approve it as well.
Thank you, sir. I would welcome council's consideration of this resolution.
I move that we adopt the designation of the Lower Maury River as a Virginia Scenic River.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
This was highlighted in yesterday's News Gazette about the importance of the resolution to support making Lower Maury a scenic river, and I'm glad we're all doing this, so thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, I would ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Ms. Strawn?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler?
Aye.
Ms. Alexander?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. And yes, as Mr. Smith said, very exciting to get this designation. And in the handout, the pictures reminded me that we need to spend more time on the river and seeing the scenic byways in our community. Next item is consideration and an approval to purchase a replacement ladder truck. I think it's the big cost that got me all excited and stammering there. But I would invite the city manager to introduce this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It may also have been the visit you had to the fire department when you got to get up in that big truck.
Absolutely.
For the past several weeks, we've had an ARPA committee, Councilmember Ziegler, Councilmember Strawn, and myself, who've been reviewing the use of city funds, reserve funds, including the ARPA funds, our end-of-year fund balance, our capital investment or capital improvement plan funds, and our equipment reserve funds. And the first order of business, as you recall, was to have the committee allocate the ARPA funds, and the committee did make a recommendation to put some of those funds into the general fund balance and the rest of those into the utility fund balance. Now we have looked at the end-of-year balance, which is just over $1,541,262. And the committee, as it studied that issue, is recommending where those dollars should be placed and what they ultimately may be used for. The committee would like to recommend $800,000 of that funding be placed in the equipment replacement fund for the topic that was noted earlier, primarily the ladder truck. $500,000 of that money would also go into the capital improvement program fund, and the remainder, which is $241,262, will be carried over into the current fiscal year for projects and unforeseen needs that may arise. The next item considered by the committee was the condition of the current ladder truck in service in the fire department. And as City Council may know, the ladder truck we currently are using is 23 years old, and the expected life service of that truck is 20 years. The current cost of replacement is expected to be at just under $1.6 million, and should we order the truck today, it would take between 16 and 20 months before it was available to us. Some of that's because of just the normal manufacturing pipeline, if you will, for that type of big equipment. They don't just have a lot of them sitting around in the factory floor or showroom, and part of it is the problem they are having as well, getting parts and materials to manufacture these vehicles today. And in the past, even though this has been on our capital, or I should say equipment replacement fund repair list or replacement list for some time, because it's such a large expenditure, $1.6 million, our equipment replacement fund typically does not have that kind of money year in, year out to replace a vehicle of that size and then go out and buy police cars and dump trucks and other pieces of equipment that we need. So if we were to make that purchase on a normal year, we just couldn't purchase police cars and dump trucks and lawnmowers for other city departments. Now, with that $1.5 million fund balance, we can address or tackle this rather large expenditure. And so it's the thought of the committee to go ahead and move and strike while the iron's hot, if you will. I would like to ask Chief Dickerson to make a few comments about some of the rationale and the need for this truck and some of the challenges we face should we not purchase it going forward.
Good evening. The foundation for what we're discussing here is this report that was commissioned by your predecessors in 2003 and delivered in January 2004. And it was a comprehensive professional fleet analysis of the fire department. The rescue squad was separate at the time and was not included. The report is not very flattering about our maintenance and replacement schedule. And it laid out a replacement schedule that we have roughly been following. The same consultants have actually continued to work with the city since I arrived here through a personal relationship that I have, pro bono, to help us continue to update this report. That set the 20-year mark based on good maintenance, reliability, wear and tear, and a long-standing ISO requirement that things be replaced by 25 years and they would start deducting points. As I researched some of this recently, I found some good news is that ISO doesn't follow their own older guidance of 25 years anymore. The bad news is they follow a National Fire Protection Association standard. So that there's always been the National Fire Protection Association that wrote a lot of industry standards about firefighting and fire sprinkler systems, fire alarms, that kind of stuff. And ISO wrote stuff for years and they conflicted. So ISO has shifted to following the International and National Fire Protection Association standards.
Excuse me, Chief Dickerson?
Yes.
Would you mind telling us what the ISO is for those in the audience who are listening to our meeting?
The Insurance Service Office is an organization that's funded by all the major insurance carriers, and they do a lot of things. But one of the big things that they do, probably the biggest, is a public protection community rating, often referred to as our grade or our ISO grade. 1 is the very best. 10 is no recognized fire protection. In the last 12 years, we have improved from, I believe it's a class 6 to an ISO class 3. To give you an idea of the importance of that, we are in only 7% of the fire departments in Virginia are an ISO class 3. One large insurance agent here in town told me about a business on Route 11 north of the city someplace who he was never allowed to sell insurance. The company he sells for wouldn't let him sell insurance until we became an ISO Class 3. He now has that business as a customer. What they're looking at really is calculating what potential loss is. And the theory is very simple. The better your ISO grade, the better your fire department is, which makes up the bulk of it. Another smaller portion of that grade is your 911 center, and another smaller portion of that is your fire hydrant system, your municipal water supply system. All of that equates to a factor that each insurance agency uses in determining a rate. And the theory being, the better the fire department is, the less loss you'll have if you have a fire in your house. Councilmember Smith asked for some data. I still have not heard back. I think a lot of that is because the actual rate is a very proprietary business amongst the industry. So, and again, another local agent who I have a personal connection with said that he would try to get me some stuff. One of the issues is that we have improved to the point where his insurance company has discarded the old rate information, and he was having trouble getting that historical information. Across the industry, everybody says the better your ISO grading, the less they can charge you for your fire insurance. And this affects everybody, from a small single-family home to the largest businesses. Even both universities have buildings that are commercially insured, maybe like in VMI. Not everything there is through a state risk pool or something like that. So it has a great benefit to the taxpayer when we invest in the fire department and improve in the fire department. That answer the ISO portion? So now we're back to the big ask. I put on the uniform with a badge and everything because I've never asked for this much money before. We're looking at trying to maintain that 20-year replacement cycle. And I know this stuff is really expensive, and I'll promise you that I celebrated my last birthday and I won't be back here 20 years from now asking for this again. This rig's 23 years old. We started kicking this can down the road 4 or 5 years ago when we started asking for this money. And back then it was about $1.2 million. The current vendor of choice, and we're looking to buy through a very large nationwide government purchasing contract mechanism to get us the best price, a competitive price that a small organization like us buying one off wouldn't normally be able to get. We're now at $1.6 million. And I've verified that with the manufacturer's rep. I verified that independently because Rockingham County just recently signed a contract for about $1.5 million, and we haven't signed a contract. We're looking at 1% per month escalators because of inflation, and they're looking at another larger 4+% increase in either December or January. So the longer we kick this can down the road, we have put at least $10,000 in repairs to that vehicle so far this year, just in the last few months. There's a big engine-driven hydraulic pump that moves that ladder, but there's a small electric emergency pump that stopped working. There's a big gearbox that lets the engine and transmission, when it's not turning the rear wheels to drive the vehicle up and down the road, turn the fire pump on it. 23-year-old bearings in the pump transfer case went bad. We had to pull it out and have it rebuilt. That also cost us 3 weeks that the vehicle was not here to be available to fight fire with, do high-angle rescues with, cut holes in roofs of places that are on fire, flow 2,000 gallons a minute like we did at the Lex Presbyterian Church or the Southern Inn Fire, those kind of big things. That flowing the big water is just a portion of the things that the ladder truck can do. In addition, in the last few years that we've been kicking this can down the road, we've replaced the big rotating swivel in the turntable. That ladder can go around and around and around, and it's a very highly sophisticated swivel. There's only 2 manufacturers in the United States who make them, and it lets all the electric, water, and hydraulic fluid pass through that. We had leaks in the hydraulic cylinders that extend the ladder. We had to rebuild 2 of those. I didn't go back 4 years through some financial records, but I'm guessing probably about $50,000 that we've spent on a rig that we had professionally appraised a few months ago. We'll be able to sell between $100,000 and $150,000. And that seems pretty drastic for a well-maintained rig, but as the appraiser told me, nobody wants to buy it for all the same reasons that we want to get rid of it. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Members of council, questions or certainly looking for consideration. I'll introduce it from the standpoint of the request is to place $800,000 into the equipment replacement fund and authorize the city manager and chief to purchase a replacement ladder truck, anticipating that it'll be paid for with this fund, as well as contributions from the public and partners in town. Mr. Ziegler.
So I'll make a motion to allocate $800,000 to the equipment replacement fund so the chief of fire and rescue and the city manager can place an order for a ladder truck, and we can purchase it with support from the city budget and our community partners.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Mr. Smith. Any further discussion?
Yeah,
Mr. Ayers.
actually, I have a question for you, Chief. Chief, I'm curious, does the truck we're planning on buying, is that just strictly a replacement for what we have, or does it bring new capabilities?
We are not seeking specific new capabilities. So we're looking for sort of a bare basic. However, this rig does bring some new capabilities. Our current truck is 95 foot tall. That's the reach. The new one is 100. That's pretty much the industry standard now.
Right.
Probably the biggest thing for us is its turning radius and drivability in our downtown.
I see.
We had a demo in a couple of weeks ago. The mayor got to go for a ride with our newest released driver of an aerial ladder truck. The young man literally got behind the wheel for the first time ever, first time we'd ever laid eyes on the vehicle, and off they went through downtown and some other places. One of the places I understand was out behind the old Kmart building, where we use some of that asphalt area just for driver training. And a maneuver that we teach them with the current ladder truck takes 4 turns to go. And I believe that Devin made it in one complete circle. It has rear axles that steer a little bit, 3 degrees or 6 degrees at low speeds. And as time evolves, the front steering axle has much tighter turning radius. They call it a cramp angle in the industry than the 23-year-old rig. What I hope that will do is save us. We've hit some stuff in town over the years. Right. It's a really difficult rig to even on the big streets, to make a left turn from Main to Nelson is a huge challenge. You probably can't make the turn from Maine to Washington unless all the stars are aligned and the cars are stopped and all that kind of stuff.
You mentioned that the existing ladder truck is 95 feet and the new one is about 100. Do we have any other equipment with that sort of reach? I'm curious. Like
the next closest with that reach would be the Glasgow Volunteer Fire Department, and it doesn't have a bucket on the end of it, so you can't do the rescue of somebody trapped on a roof or something like that as easily. You can't flow the large quantities of water. The next closest comparable vehicle to what we are replacing is in the Fishersville station of the Augusta County Fire and Rescue. They responded here during the Southern Inn fire 10 years ago. So, if we don't have this capability, we've got a heck of a wait to get it to come here.
So this equipment would be very important for buildings with multiple stories then?
Very important for buildings with multiple stories. Very important even for a single-family dwelling house fire. And very important for large buildings that aren't necessarily very tall, but are very big, such as university buildings, Lowe's, Walmart, that are all in our primary response area.
I see. Thank you.
I actually heard a report today about 30% of the runs this vehicle does are into Rockbridge County.
I have a quick question. You mentioned earlier ISO ratings. Is there a sense of the ISO rating with or without this ladder truck?
We are literally by the skin of our teeth. You got to have between 70 and 79 points to get an ISO Class 3, and we are at like 70.35 points. We made that crest when council allowed us to accept the SAFER grant and hire 4 firefighters and move on. And the year after those people came on board, we had our most recent grading from ISO, and that was the only thing that changed was our staffing level. So that improvement of staffing to where we are today brought us from an ISO Class 4 to a Class 3.
I was thinking of with the truck
Oh, yeah.
or without the truck.
I don't remember the exact number of points that the ladder truck brings us as a requirement. Without the ladder truck, we would clearly slide back to Class 4.
I would just point out affirmation with the chief. The tail end of the current has taken out some stop signs and some other things just because that's such a big swing. And also just terrain. I know there was a exercise at Brubaker Field, and coming off near the baseball field damaged the back, again, because of the tail end on it. This has a very short tail. And then the other thing I remember the gentleman with Pierce talking about was the fact that instead of having probably 4 people needing to get the outriggers and everything in place, you can do it, much of it with one person. So other people can be tending to the fire or staging or tending to people while one person is getting the truck. Prefer to have multiple, but the time saving and the human capital savings is substantial.
Sort of back to Mr. Ayers' question, it's not really a technology, but a design. Our current ladder truck is longer than the other one, and a big portion of that, about the last 10 feet of it, is invisible to the driver. Because the body goes back like this, the aerial is narrower, and the bucket is narrower, and the bucket hangs off the back of the body, and you can't see it at all. The newer rig that we're looking at, the bucket rests on top of the body and stops. So when you're going to look in your mirrors and see the body of your vehicle back there, you know exactly where the rear end of your overall vehicle is.
So is there going to be a camera back there
Yes, new stuff has a camera.
in there? So all that. So I have,
This one even has cameras that come off the side so that the driver can know where to position the outriggers as they're coming to a stop in front of the fire.
so we're in the 20th century now with cameras there, body cams as well in there.
Indeed.
I have another question related to expenses of the fire department. This $1.6 million fire truck, admittedly is a single item. Are there other expenses that the fire department is planning on coming to city council in the near term to fund?
Nothing that's not already on the radar on our apparatus replacement plan.
This comes out of the equipment replacement fund, and so there's no other large piece of equipment of this nature for several years. I mean, this again is the largest piece of equipment we own. The general operating funds of the department, we haven't gotten into the budget conversation yet for fiscal year '23. Haven't heard anything from the chief that would indicate we're going to be asking for a lot more, but we'll be talking about, as in every discussion with the department, what we need to make improvements or provide good service. And then we'll just have to balance the budget based on the needs and the funding available to the city, and I'll be recommending something to you in, April or May, but don't see anything large at this point.
All right, thank you. Just curious.
We have a motion and a second. Unless there's any additional questions or discussion, I would ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Smith? Aye. Ms. Strawn?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Ziegler?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
Ms. Alexander?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Get that rascal ordered, and good luck, and thank you for all the work that you and your team do. See Trent Roberts in the audience this evening. We're grateful for our fire marshal and the work that you all do collaboratively to keep our city safe.
One last thing, but related to the fire truck, I didn't hear mention what the delay time after you place the order. When will we expect delivery? 16 to 20.
16 to 20. Thank you, sir. Next item is consideration and approval of compensation adjustments for police department uniform personnel. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two big items tonight, both with public safety, both critical to our community. And I will start out by noting, and I think we've had some brief discussions before, that we've had some difficulties over the last 6 to 12 months recruiting and retaining employees throughout the city, but it's more critical in the police department than in any other department of the community. And prior to the start of this fiscal year, in my mind, I had been putting a plan in place to do a comprehensive study of our compensation system for all of our city departments and employees. However, since this summer, as we started losing one employee after another, officer after another in the police department, it really became apparent to me in conversations with our HR director, Robbie Bailey, and our Chief Green in the police department that we probably had to take action before next fiscal year. When you get to the point where you've lost 4 officers in a department of 18, that's a significant percentage. And between May of last spring and September of this year, we didn't receive any applications for those positions. Since that time, we received 3 certified officer applications in September, I believe, but for various reasons, I don't believe we were able to make a hire at all. And so looking at where we stand today, we looked and did some research on how do we fare against our neighbors, Rockbridge County and the city of Buena Vista. How do we fare on the region as far as compensation? And we looked at the chief, our finance director, Jennifer Bell, and Robbie Bailey looked at a number of communities and polled them, surveyed them as to what they were paying their officers who started out. And you can see this illustration in illustration A. It shows the number of communities again in this area. It shows that a Lexington police officer starts out for $36,299. We pay a little bit more than that, but not much. Rockbridge County Sheriff starts out a new deputy at $38,664. And the city of Buena Vista starts out a police officer at $42,000. So we're the lowest in our area. If you look at the number of communities that we polled, the average is $40,573 of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, looks like about 15 different cities and counties in our region. Again, they're $40,573 average. So we're about $4,274 below what the average community is paying for a starting officer. In addition, looking at that data and looking at what our financial situation is, we've looked at what our revenues are over the past 10 years, and in approximately the last 10 years, we're seeing about a 4.3% increase in revenues annually. So we're doing fairly well when it comes to a community as to revenue growth. We've seen some years that are better than that, some years that are worse, but in general, that's a pretty good growth rate for a community. We've also seen that our fund balance in the general fund, which is our savings account, has increased also at about 4% a year. So we've been very prudent, very conservative in our budgeting and our management so that we can put more money into those reserves for some of our big projects. Some of those reserves end up buying fire engines. Some of them patch streets. Some of them buy other equipment and take care of things in our parks, other departments. So it's very important that we focus on those items in order to provide them and to keep the quality of life we'd like to see in our community. But at the same time, inflation by various measures has been about 1.7% for the last 10 years annually. Again, it goes up and down year over year. And over that 10-year period, our average increase to our employees has been 1.63%. So our revenues have increased fairly well. We've managed to save money and use it for those very important priorities that we've had to deal with year in and year out. And we've also, unfortunately, not been able to keep up with inflation and pay our employees in a like fashion. We've focused on the true priorities of this community over the last 10 years, and now one of the priorities we have to focus on is compensating our employees. And I'll let Chief Green talk about some of the particulars about why this is important to act now, but there are some very real differences between the police department, city hall employees, public works employees when it comes to how we hire those employees and get them on the street. Chief?
Good evening.
Chief, if you can just, perfect, thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Friedman, distinguished City Council members. As I'm sure you are all aware, of the national shortages in policing throughout the nation, the city of Lexington is not immune to this dire national trend. Due to the uncertain political climate facing the future of law enforcement, we have seen a dramatic decrease in police officer applications and yet an increase in existing police officers either retiring early, leaving the profession completely, or going to another law enforcement agency for a higher paying job. In these modern policing times, we are asking our police officers to not only be guardians of our citizens, but routinely they are mediators, problem solvers, guidance counselors, psychiatrists, and modern trauma providers. An officer can perform a multitude of these vocations during any given 12-hour work shift. And they must do this without a flaw, because one mishap can mean a loss of their life, a civil lawsuit, or a criminal charge. We are not only asking, but expect outstanding and flawless delivery of these services from our Lexington police officers. Currently, at a starting rate less than $40,000 a year. Presently, half of my police officers make less than $40,000 a year or in the low 40s. The existing pay is the main contributing factor of our workforce crisis, creating over a 20% reduction in my police force. All the officers that have left in the 5 months that I have been here have left for a higher paying job in another law enforcement agency. Lexington is a great community, which should attract the best and the brightest qualified applicants. But due to us being the lowest paid in the region, is hindering us from being competitive with our neighboring jurisdictions and attracting exemplary applicants. It is also important to note the unique difference in policing here in the city of Lexington as opposed to the other jurisdictions. Due to the city of Lexington's vibrant and welcoming community, we host over 35 special events a year. These have to be staffed by police officers for the safety of our citizens. Not only does this generate an added strain on my understaffed department, but it also creates an officer wellness concern with work-life unbalanced environment for my police officers. At full staffing, officers' work schedule allows for them to have off every other weekend, which equates to 26 weekends a month. But due to the 35 special events that occur, usually over a weekend, this requires significant manpower to provide adequate safety for the event while also allowing officers to be available to respond to 911 calls throughout the city. This requires most of my officers to work nearly every weekend and to work mandatory overtime throughout the week to cover routine patrol duties due to our short staffing. Additionally, 7 out of these 35 events occur in a city holiday that these officers must work. An example of this is Councilwoman Strawn actually explained some of the great events that we have coming up. Thanksgiving morning, they will have to work the Gobble Wobble Run. The very next day after Thanksgiving, they will have to work the tree lighting and candlelight procession. Then the very next weekend, they'll have to work Friday night for the Christmas parade, return early Saturday morning for the Jingle Bell Run. Again, under $40,000, understaffed, and overworked. Increasing the pay for our police officers is an urgent necessity for retention that can be immediately implemented, which will provide our police officers with positive reinforcement that their extraordinary dedication and unwavering commitment to the safety of our community is valued and appreciated by our elected officials, as well as an integral component to making the Lexington Police Department the premier choice for police applicants. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter.
Thank you, Chief, for those compelling words.
Mr. Mayor, as a follow-up, I would like to add that we have calculated what this, of course, costs the city, because we're recommending a 12% increase across the department for new recruits, and that's also reflected above to all ranks and years of service above, so we don't have salary compression and that we treat all of our officers fairly in the department. And this will cost us about $99,000, a little over $99,000 a year, the current year, and of course that will occur every year henceforth. In the current year, we did not budget for that expense. However, because we unfortunately do have vacancies within the department, we can cover most of that increase, about $79,000, because we have 3 vacancies since July 1 that won't be filled for half a year. We've had another vacancy occur since then, and we also have agreed that 1 detective's position will not be filled at least till the end of the fiscal year while we review our staffing, our compensation, and other factors that are important to the department. So of that, again, of that $99,000, $79,000 can be provided within the current budget, within the current police officer or police department budgeting. The other $19,000 would come out of what we see to be, at this point in time, unexpected revenues that have been collected in our meals, lodging, and sales tax. And we already have seen over $93,000 of unanticipated revenues just in this first quarter. So we're very confident that we can take the remaining $19,000 out of revenues that were not budgeted and have not been assigned. And that's how I would recommend it be paid for in the current fiscal year. And then, of course, in our next fiscal year, we'd have to work it into our budget, just as we do every other item. And you would understand, of course, that that is forthcoming, because once we make that wage increase, it stays with us. So appreciate your time, and would definitely wholeheartedly recommend moving forward with this proposal before you this evening.
Members of council have questions. Mr. Ziegler.
Why don't I go ahead and just make a motion?
Please.
Since it's a priority, that we approve the compensation adjustments presented in this briefing with the understanding the costs will be seen both in the current budget and then going forward in FY23 and beyond.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Strong.
No, I'm in favor of the compensation adjustment, and thank you for all your work and for all our police force does. And we did talk about it at the Main Street Lexington Economic Vitality Committee, that these events do place a hardship on the police, and because there are so many groups that have different events, and that's important to the vitality of our community. We as a council, I imagine, will have to address that in the future of how we balance those two things. But thank you for all you do, and we
Thank
couldn't
you,
do
ma'am.
all this without you.
Thank you.
Yes, on behalf of a thankful council and a thankful city. I have a motion and a second, unless there's any other discussion. Mr. Smith.
I highlighted last meeting the efforts I've tried to make to raise awareness through this council and through the public, the heightened demands that law enforcement has been thrust upon, dealing more with mental health instead of real law enforcement, and the mental toll that takes on our staff, and fully wholeheartedly support this increase. And one thing I would like to see happen as a result of this hitting the streets in our social media and print media is to get that awareness that I've been trying to raise just in this forum to the rest of the general public, to cultivate some support from the public and the region that we're so fortunate in which to live. The circumstances that LPD is dealing with right now it was demonstrated just 4 weeks ago when we had a bit of a health crisis on Main Street by someone who wanted to enjoy our fresh air. So I hope we can take this moment and raise awareness through the folks that LPD serves in our community. I would also hope that we can generate some jumpstart support for Lexington Police Foundation that unfortunately over the last 4 or 5 years has kind of fallen by the wayside. And I think the opportunity is as our city manager has said, the iron is it's time to strike it. And this is a wonderful opportunity to do just that. So my comments and my support for what you all do. Thank you.
Hi, just one thing. One, I'm very glad that we're taking this vote tonight. I wish we'd taken it sooner. My question is, if we pass this tonight, how quickly will it be implemented and affecting their take-home pay?
I would say immediately. We do have to do some paperwork and make sure we can make those changes in the compensation, but in the next pay period. I'm not sure what that date is. Robbie, could you comment on that?
It would be effective as 11/1, and I think that would make the first paycheck November the 19th.
Thank you, Robbie.
Imminent.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, would ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Smith?
3 ayes.
Mr. Ziegler?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
Ms. Strawn?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Ms. Alexander?
Happy to say aye.
Motion carries unanimously. And Chief, thank you for working with City Manager and Finance Director and bringing forward this idea. And as there are other tools that you need to attract qualified and competent people to join our accredited and professional team, please let us know. We're grateful for the work that you do and your leadership of our police department.
Thank you. Thank you all for your continued support.
Before we, there is no closed meeting this evening, and before we move to adjournment, I wanted to take a moment to drop back and Chad Coffey, who's the director of RARO, I wanted to invite all the college students that are here this evening. I challenge you to get involved in our community, whether that be as a coach with RARO, always looking for coaches or volunteers to help out with the children of our community, or whether it be with our chiefs, with the police department for some of the events that were detailed tonight, or with our fire and EMS. We have some terrific success stories of students that have become involved and enriched their lives and their experience at Washington and Lee and in Lexington. So challenge you and invite you to get involved in our community and help to make it as meaningful as you can make it. And unless there's any other business to come before council, we will stand adjourned. Thank you all very much. And for the students, if you have questions and want to direct them to individual council members, all of our contact information is on the website.